All right, hello everybody. So today I'm going to be breaking down the behemoth of a stimulus package that was recently passed by the United States Senate, and the bill passed with unanimous support. So the final vote tally was 96-0, and for something to get that kind of widespread support, there with a bill that large, it is going to have some good elements, but it's also going to have some bad elements. So I'm going to be kind of talking about the good and the bad. So I'm going to start off with the bad. So the biggest thing that everyone's talking about with this is that there's $500 billion written into the bill that is for corporate bailouts, but the way the law is written is that it allows for that money to be leveraged by the U.S. Treasury, which is currently being run by Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, and he can kind of leverage that money to the up to a total of $4.5 trillion, which is a gigantic amount of money for corporate bailout. So that is something that a lot of people have problems with because that money will likely be given with very limited strings attached. Very, very similar to the Wall Street bailouts that happened in 2008. So one aspect of this kind of no strings attached is that the bill allows for bailout companies to lay off up to 10% of their employees up to 6 months after these bailouts go into effect. And then after those 6 months, there are no restrictions on how many employees a company could lay off, which is not a good thing. So another problematic aspect of the bill is that while there are no stock buybacks allowed for a year after a company is bailed out, after that year, companies can go back to buying back their stocks, and during that year, they can still pay out dividends to their shareholders. So there will be a one-time check sent out to individuals making less than $75,000 a year, and that check will be for $1,200. You'll also get $500 for every child that you have that is under the age of 16. And then if you make more than $75,000, that money kind of tapers off all the way up to $100,000 a year. And if you make more than $100,000 a year, you don't get anything. And so what's kind of important to point out is that this kind of money that is being sent out is means tested, so not everybody gets it. So what means tested means is basically that it's not universal. And then we can kind of like compare this to what's happening in Canada right now. So in Canada, everybody gets $2,000 over the next 4 months. So every month you're going to get $2,000 from the government. A lot different than what we're doing here in the US. So some of the companies that are likely to be bailed out are airline companies, and something that I feel like is relevant to point out is that last year, some of the biggest airline companies spent 96% of their free cash flow on buying back their own stocks. So to get even more specific, JetBlue, Alaska Airlines, and Delta are three companies that paid $0 in federal income taxes last year, but they will be getting bailed out while the average worker gets means tested. And so what this kind of shows is that we live in kind of a society right now where companies like JetBlue, Delta, they can privatize the gains when things are going well, but then they can socialize the losses when things aren't going well. And what this basically is it's not even capitalism at this point. It is corporatism. We are just essentially the government is working for these large companies because capitalism would be that these companies aren't doing good so they would fail, but we're not even letting them fail. We're going to be paying off the bigger companies and basically cementing them as the top companies in our economy. So there isn't even a provision in this bill that prevents companies from giving bonuses to their executives during times of financial duress, like what's going on right now. And you might say, well, that's crazy. Like, who would even give out a bonus to their executives during times like this? But back in 2008, after the Wall Street bailouts, the investment banks were giving out bonuses to their executives, and their rationale for this was they needed to retain the talent. It's ridiculous. So this bill isn't all bad. There are some provisions in there that are good. If there weren't any good provisions, you wouldn't have people like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren voting for the bill. One of those good provisions is that there is where the administration can now purchase equity shares in the companies being bailed out. I'm not sure up to what percentage, but the goal of this is to potentially compensate the taxpayers that their money is going towards these companies. There's also going to be $100 billion sent out to hospitals that are kind of working on the front lines of this pandemic. Obviously, I wish that this was more money, but it is still a good thing. $100 billion is a lot of money. One of the biggest kind of benefits of this bill is that there will be a massive expansion of unemployment benefits. So if you make $75,000 a year or less and you got laid off, you will basically receive all 100% of your income compensated in unemployment benefits, and that is huge, especially because recently we had 3.3 million workers filed for unemployment. That is unprecedented numbers, stuff that we haven't seen since the Great Depression. So this was a huge provision, and I'm really glad we got it in this bill. So overall, I think that this bill is going to age horribly, and I think that it's really kind of difficult that this bill passed with the kind of support that it did. 96-0 support. You know, you had even people like Bernie Sanders voting for these bailouts for these corporations. I really think that people are going to look back on this in the years to come, as they do kind of with the Wall Street bailouts, maybe with a little bit less of a in an egregious way, but it is still pretty pretty disappointing to see people like Bernie Sanders voting for this bill. I understand that there are provisions for workers in the bill. I really think that in a perfect situation, what would have happened is that the bill would have been split into two, where it would have been the stimulus that's going to directly to people and to workers, and then there would be a separate bill for the stimulus that's going towards businesses. Obviously, this isn't what was going to happen, because if they did separate it, the part that was just going to businesses, you wouldn't get progressives like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren voting for the bill. So they put these things together so that they can get more people voting for it, so that these things can pass with something like 96-0 votes. So I hope I did a decent job explaining kind of the bill and what went into it, the good and the bad. If you guys have any disagreements with anything I said in this video, make sure to leave a comment below. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and have a great day.